Here we go with the May wrap-up. Welcome to Rethink Real Estate. My name is Ben Brady, and this is a real estate podcast aimed to deliver sales strategies, marketing tips, and business insights from industry experts and myself to build a listing-focused business for the future. Let's get into it. Here we go with the May wrap-up. I think that the theme for May was the month of acceptance. And I don't mean that from an offer perspective. Don't get me wrong. I would rather the success rate be much higher than what it is at the moment. There's no doubt about it. If I was to look at the numbers overall from our white labeling business, which is across all of the country, our Harcourts auction business is mainly in Southern California and Oregon. But the reality is everywhere else that we're doing auctions at the moment, over 75% of all of the auctions that we are conducting at the moment are within Florida, Tennessee, Colorado, and Arizona. Now, one of the reasons behind that is obviously because of those markets being a little tougher, and certainly in the sense when I say a little tougher, probably a lot tougher, is that those are high inventory marketplaces, certainly at particular price points or above particular price points. Those markets are sitting on the market quite some time. The other markets where we have quite a bit of inventory at the moment, not as much as in the ones that I just mentioned, would be Texas, mainly in the Austin area, that's for sure. But the Austin marketplace has been a little sluggish because of the tech factor and the tech pop, I suppose, there at one point. Now, all of that to be said, why I'm calling it the month of acceptance is that I believe that the market has been this stagnant in these locations for long enough now that process of elimination or going through that denial element from sellers has now gotten more into the reality side of it. So what I'm saying is that having the tough conversations with good people on a regular basis, more of them are much more aware of the market that they're dealing in, not looking at comps, say it's too deep into 2025 at this point for people to start referring to the October or November comp in 2024 where that property in my neighborhood got X amount of dollars. That's obviously a very far and distant result that probably won't come into the factors of what their property is worth in today's market. The other thing also that we're seeing in probably over 80% of the markets that we're in at the moment is that there's been a comparable sale that the seller is very aware of that is sold much cheaper than what they thought it was going to. So now it's set a precedent in that market where there's that level of acceptance. Don't get me wrong, acceptance is probably not the term that I would use to say that it's easy, but more so from a perspective that if you are pointing out the facts, they are very aware of where things sit, okay, and they become more acceptable of it because there's more evidence than ever before of the market being a little more sluggish. So I think that there's something to be said out of all of that. If you look at the auction success rate that we're having prior to auction day at the moment, it is gone from 48% now to in excess of about 60% of our properties are selling prior to auction day. Why is that? That's because we have less people interested in each property. And the real leverage point of an auction that even if you only have one person interested, they don't know they're the only person interested. And that is something that I do want to quickly just double click on. You've heard me say it a million times, I know it, but traditional isn't working when the average days on market increases, and there might have even been a price reduction as well. The buyer knows they're in complete control. They know they're probably likely the only person. Whereas the perception of a buyer leading into auction day is that there's always going to be more competition. Even if that is not the reality, that gives us the upper hand in the leverage of a negotiation. Again, I feel like a broken record with that. I go through that a million times a day with people. But it's also, I think that it's the acceptance from agents within our process that there are different types of auctions. For example, there's the auction that if you do a bidding to start from reduction of an incredible amount, is that you get a flood of interest and we can use that momentum in order to get offers prior to auction, or we can get a really good result at live auction. Right? Letting people, bid it up at live auction is we get between an 8 and 12% higher result than a multiple offer situation at a live auction. Now, the other type of auction is that you don't have really any pickup in interest, where you need to really educate your seller on value and get a really good assessment of, is this a bad investment of your time? Okay. Now, the other portion of that is that same type of auction where you have limited interest, you use it to educate your seller, but then you can use the element of auction day approaching as a leverage point that even if you have that one buyer interested, them not know that they hold the upper hand, and you can absolutely push back and push on their offer to get it up and to clean the terms up even better as well, because we're providing all the reports and disclosures up front. So not only is May, I call it the month of acceptance when it comes to people realizing the market that they are in, and it is not that buoyant marketplace or bubbly market, or they also have gone away from, I've heard less and less that, hey, we'll just wait, because I think that they realize that this headwind in the marketplace and this change, whilst it's not going to be dropping 20 to 50% of market value, don't get me wrong, there are certain markets that we're in at the moment. If you're a condo in Miami or in certain parts of Florida, I would hold on if you can, but the reality is that they are going through and are realizing that a decision not to sell today is a decision not to sell for probably a couple of years until things change a little. So now it's gone away from the fact of, well, I'll just wait it out. It'll be a 6-month thing, or we'll wait until after the tariff talk is there, or wait until the market is a little more stable, or so on and so forth. The excuses are starting to diminish, and there is a realization that is ultimately there. Now, all in all, we are still being pretty selective when it comes to the auctions that we are taking on at the moment, because we've got to realize the ones that we're going to go through a contributing factor of time, effort, also pain when you're actually dealing with sellers that aren't getting the value that they want, but it's also pain from an agent's perspective as well to us. Most agents are still very defending of price, and they are very delusional around what they actually need to do in order to get their seller to realize. There's a very big difference between the agents that succeed with our process and don't. One of the leading indicators that we have found in the last 2 months, and one of the things that we are going after from a targeting perspective, the agents that have done multiple price reductions are actually better agents to deal with than agents that are just allowing their sellers to sit within denial. Don't get me wrong, there's some agents that we can identify that haven't done price reductions, and that is mainly because the seller is not great when it comes to understanding value, even though they're trying, okay, but that's a little more rare, because the other agents that are having multiple price reductions within the space of 30 days are the ones that we are finding are having far more success with the process, because they are willing to have the conversation with their sellers around the bidding to start from price and the negotiation up, and giving a clear-cut understanding of market value. So all in all, is that volume for us is certainly something that we're managing at the moment, because if we said yes to everything, it'd be a bad investment of our time in a lot of ways, and we're trying to defend our success rate a little more. But I will say this, and this is something that I want to put out there to the general buyers, general agents in the market, is that I have to be honest, there's probably about 20 to 30% of the inventory that we take on where we do sell it, and I did think that it was going to be a really big challenge to sell it the seller's expectations, but within 2 weeks we realized very quickly that seller would adjust far more than what we thought they would. Now, there is the other polar opposite of as well. About 20% of the inventory we take on and realize that the seller is never going to budge on price, okay? So therefore we have to be very clear about handing that back in a pretty quick time frame, okay? So that therefore there isn't the effort from our team or the agent that gets sucked into that and then has a bad taste in their mouth based on auction, because it is not real estate by magic. It is obviously real estate by just clear and transparency to the marketplace. But all in all, I'm glad that we're in a moment of acceptance. It's helping us. There's no doubt about that, as our success rate continues to tick up as opposed to where it was at the beginning of the year, where things were just really, really stagnant because people had excuses. So don't underestimate your sellers to understand the marketplace that they're ultimately in at the moment, okay? And make sure that you're having those conversations. Them being accepting of the market means they need to know what the market is doing. So therefore, that is your responsibility to be the vehicle that takes it to them. Thanks so much. So about 75% of our audience hasn't liked, followed, or subscribed to our podcast. It would mean the world to us, and it would help this podcast more than you know to expand our reach if you were to like, follow, or subscribe on any of the platforms that you're watching or listening on. Thanks again.